It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking property news after the weekend. Yes, the weekend went by way too fast. We are talking, of course, property news 7 days a week. And you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. 29th day today for July. Having a look at some house prices in several popular Victorian tourist towns. Now, some of these spots include Mansfield in the Victorian Alps. That, in fact, saw the steepest fall, with prices down 9.1% to a median of $663,000. Bass Coast, including Phillip Island, that dropped 6.3% to $726,000. And Domain's house price report for the June quarter attributes this decline to an increase in second home owner selling and providing more housing stocks for buyers entering the regional market. While prices have softened, Domain says that there is a period of stagnation for the regional market due to affordability issues and weak population growth. And the oversupply of houses for sale in the Bass Coast has also contributed to falling prices. So that is quite interesting from Domain this morning. Right, let's catch up this morning with Simon Kuestenmacher. And a very good morning, Simon. Welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast. Yes, I guess everybody, even people with second homes, in this case, in those areas that I just mentioned, having to sell off because of some of the cost factors, the living cost factors, along with everything else.
Yes, we're not 100% sure whether they sell because of cost of living pressures or whether they sell because they feel that housing won't be as attractive of an investment compared to other investments. That does not necessarily just mean the profit margins, but also just the nuisance of those investment properties or just second homes. They do become, of course, expensive and you go, well, maybe this is not the right time anymore. In those regional markets, that might be a bit of a welcome development because these markets were driven up massively during the pandemic. We saw big increases in house prices. These house prices, of course, priced out low-income local workers, and the local youth that potentially could have settled in the area did not so, or stayed at home with mom and dad for longer. So these developments now get softened a bit, but of course, in comparison to pre-pandemic levels, we're still talking about elevated higher prices here. So it's not that housing in Mansfield or on the Bass Coast is all of a sudden dirt cheap and super affordable. It's just that a certain segment of buyers is leaving the market, and then this leads to relatively strong drops because in small regional markets it only takes a couple more people wanting to move in, what we've seen during the pandemic, or now a couple of people wanting to sell, making more housing available, and then those markets react relatively strongly in either direction from a price perspective.
Yeah, interesting. When they're talking about stagnation, they're also linking it to weak population growth. And that is a bit of a problem, population growth. If we have a look at the global migration for Australia, because we are a global migration nation. And I think you've got some comments to make around this, because sooner or later, the interesting thing is that could actually come to an end.
Yeah, so Australia, of course, is a growth nation. So we've seen strong population growth for the next decade. We are forecast to see 350 to 400,000 people growth year after year. And as a rule of thumb in Australia, you can always remember that 2/3 of population growth comes from overseas. That's how we got used to grow our population. 2/3 from overseas, only 1/3 is an increase of babies compared to the number of deaths. It's called natural increase. So how can can this develop or might this develop in the future? There are, of course, people who argue we should increase migration. There are people who argue we should decrease migration. But if we just zoom out a bit and we look at global demographic data, the migrants that we take into Australia are almost exclusively aged 18 to 39 years of age. And then the skilled migrants that we get into the country, because we like their qualifications, we tend to get them in as young as possible because we want them on cheap starter wages. We want them to pay into the superannuation accounts for as long as possible so that they do not utilize the pension system in retirement. And of course, we want them to be productive worker bees for as long as possible. So the vast majority of migrants in Australia, around 80% or so, are 18 to 39 years of age. This global population of 18 to 39-year-olds is stagnating in about a decade and a half, 2 decades, and it will then decline soon after that. So that means we are increasingly running out of global migration-aged population, just at the same time as we see a massive increase of older population that, of course, need care, that need medical services. So there'll be more and more countries in the world who will actually proactively seek out migrants. So the competition for migrants gets bigger just in the time when the pool of migrants gets smaller. So can Australia, in, let's say, 3-4 decades, easily demand those really high visa fees that we do at the moment? No, definitely not. We will hand out generous tax cuts. We will maybe hand out airplane tickets to Australia or something like this. We will find ways of attracting migrants. And theoretically speaking, Australia would only need 250,000 net new migrants year after year.
Yeah, so that cohort of 85 plus, man, that is such a scary number. So the trick is to just keep on attracting as long as possible migrants into Australia because we are competing against other countries. You've only got to have a look at the UAE and Dubai. Very attractive. A lot of Australians moving in there. There is no tax to pay. How attractive is that? Plenty of sunshine, although it can be argued, Simon, maybe a little bit too hot. But, you know, that's a point in case. In Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, I mean, they're spending tons of money to get people moving there.
Exactly. And these economies are doing a bit more than just attracting a couple of migrants. They are completely reinventing their business model. They are, traditionally speaking, just exporters of oil and nothing else. And that's all they have from a resource perspective. So they try to become the hubs of a new economy. They invest heavily into all the fun buzzwords of AI and crypto and blockchain. All these fun things is what they invest in because they want to know if there is this completely footloose industry in the future. We want to attract them because that's our only chance in a post-oil world. So there is a bigger strategic element behind the push of getting development and getting money settled in the region so that people have a vested interest in the region and do not pull out because that's what they rely on. They do this with the branding exercises in Saudi Arabia with buying all those football stars, your Ronaldos and co, in order to increase the awareness of the area. And they pull a lot of money into this because they know otherwise the economy in the long run will be down to zero. And they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and it certainly helps to have big pockets from oil reserves for those two countries that you're talking about. Australia, of course, is offering something much different, but regardless of that, when you have a shiny, impressive city like Dubai and all of the must-haves being offered in the real estate sector, it's not hard to see why so many Australians have made Dubai home. And we are back with more after this.
From powerful and up-to-date news to professional real estate experts with the latest property trends on the Real Estate Podcast.
Well, you might have seen an ABC article on Friday about a woman who moved out of her 4-bedroom bungalow in Brisbane and into a 10 by 4 metre flat in her backyard. This move allowed her son, his partner and their 2 friends to rent out the woman's house affordably. Now, the friends had been living in a mouldy, leaky rental with rising costs, and the retired school teacher, the mum, she felt guilty and wanted to help out. Using her superannuation, the mum built the backyard flat for just over $150,000. This arrangement, though, isn't charity. The tenants cover 85% of the bills. And this trend, of course, relying on the bank of mum and dad, is only going to increase as the housing costs rise.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day, from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
And it's your Monday morning real estate breakfast. A new week, of course, represents a week of opportunities. And if you have been looking at properties over the weekend, there is no doubt this whole analysis that takes place. Sometimes, the more that we look, the more we get confused. We are talking to Simon Kuestenmacher this morning. When we last spoke, we got a few emails from listeners to say that they were really interested in our conversation, wanted to hear more about it. That is the modular housing. So what's been happening since we last spoke? Because I know that you're pretty keen on seeing these factories, these large factories getting built so that it's at scale. And I think that is the point. It's got to be done at scale to have any sort of significance.
Exactly. So my main demographic argument is that we are running out of workers. We have a big cohort retiring. All the while, particularly in the next 10 years, we have millennials making babies, going on parental leave. We run out of workers. All the while, the aging population demands more workers. We grow the population. We need to build housing at scale with a limited workforce. That is difficult. And if you go to a greenfield development site, you can't argue that this is the best and most efficient way that we could possibly be building housing. That then leads to the argument we say, hey, how about we move the whole residential construction idea from the construction sector into manufacturing? Surely we can build housing with the help of automation and robots in a factory at a much cheaper scale, much more environmentally friendly scale. Remember that a greenfield development site has a material waste of around 25% or something stupendous like this. This could be cut down close to zero in a smart factory setting. You would have robots. That means you need fewer skilled workers. We run out of those skilled workers to begin with. You then just need to find a way of building this housing in a way that it can just be easily legoed together on site. But these are just technical challenges. And there are investment challenges. How do we ensure that there is money floating into this? Even somebody big like Lendlease or Mirvac struggle to have enough money to completely reinvent the way we build housing. And this is where I would always point to institutional investors like super funds or even the government to bankroll this completely new development of housing. And since this is an issue around the world, this is a bit of knowledge, a bit of skill that we could easily export to the world and make a good buck in the process.
Yeah, and particularly at scale, the way that would drive the price down. But, oh man, you've got all those robots going for it. Supply and demand. It would basically inverse itself. Maybe that's a subject that we can talk about next time. Simon, thank you once again for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. Enjoy your Monday.
It's been a pleasure as always.
Remember, we are not a real estate company. We are 100% all about increasing your awareness and knowledge for buying and selling properties.
And more so, probably not as many leaving. That's always been a battle for Toowoomba, is keeping your younger crowd, obviously, when they finish school and, want to look at universities and professionals and all that sort of stuff. We're not losing them anymore. They're sticking around.
So $200,000 at the moment in Cloncurry gets you a neat 3-bed, 1-bath house on a good size block. So 800 to 1,000 square metres is standard for us. $200,000 is not necessarily a, tear down job that needs to be fixed up. It's a neat home in Cloncurry.
They're often told by their hierarchy that we're not to touch these guys because their police forces will come after us. But they know that the Australian authorities won't go after them. So that's why Australia is seen as an easy target.
I've got a friend of mine who went nuts during the property market boom and leveraged against the other. And he ended up with more than 20 properties. So he's having to let some go.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.